Hello, friends. First of all, let me begin by thanking you for your wonderful response to my first two videos. Uh, I'm really humbled and happy at your response, and it has also encouraged me to carry on making videos and sharing some of my favorite movies with you. Today's video, I will be talking about some of my favorite romantic movies. These are English movies, mostly Hollywood movies. And as always, my list includes films which are all not very common and popular or easily available. They include some movies which are a little harder to find, and some real gems which have been missed out by a large number of people. I hope you like my choices, and I hope it encourages you to watch some of them if possible. So, the first film I want to talk about today is a 1945 film. It's made by David Lean, and it's called Brief Encounter. It's based on a play by Noel Coward called Still Life, and it's it's a beautiful love story. It's set in a small railway station in an English town, and it's a story of two strangers who meet by chance, and they develop a relationship. They they have they have a connection between the two of them, which actually takes both of them by surprise because both of them are respectively married to other people, and from what it seems in the movie, happily married at that. And yet they find themselves drawn to each other, and it's a beautiful movie. And like most things British, it is very subtle. Nothing is over the top. Everything is underplayed beautifully. And the film really stands on two superlative performances from the lead cast, Trevor Howard and Celia Johnson. I mean, for me, when I saw the movie for the first time, by the time I was done with the movie, I was hopelessly in love with Celia Johnson. She is absolutely brilliant in the movie. And it's a very heartwarming and beautiful movie. Something pretty similar to this was made later in the 90s. The movie called Falling in Love, starring Robert De Niro and Meryl Streep. But I think, personally, Brief Encounter is the much, much, much superior original to Falling in Love. If you haven't watched Brief Encounter, do watch it. It's often been rated as one of the greatest British movies ever made, and it's not without a reason. It definitely deserves to be called that. Do watch Brief Encounter if you haven't. The next movie I want to talk about is a 1973 film made by Sidney Pollack, and it's The Way We Were, starring Barbara Streisand and Robert Redford in an absolutely wonderful, wonderful movie. It's a story of opposites attract. That's perhaps the best way to describe The Way We Were, because the two characters portrayed by Streisand and Redford, Katie and Hubble, are as opposite as chalk and cheese. And Katie is this fiercely independent, politically opinionated idealist. She's fighting for what she thinks is the just cause and the right cause, and she's all there. Whereas Hubble, played by Robert Redford, is this charming, laid-back, easygoing character. He has a flair for writing, and he's really not bothered too much about what's happening in the world, much to her annoyance. And yet, it is these opposites in their natures which actually attracts them to each other. and they find themselves drawn in an inevitable relationship. But reality dawns once they are together, because then they realize that their differences are really, really way too much for them to sustain something meaningful. And it's all depicted so brilliantly in the movie. You really can't take sides. You really can't. You really can't. You identify so much with both the characters that you feel bad for them, to an extent that when the inevitable breakup happens, I think the viewer is as torn as probably the protagonists of the movie are. And for me, I saw the movie for the first time when I was a teenager, and the last scene affected me so much that I refused to see this movie again, despite knowing it was such a beautiful movie. But I refused to see it, saying that I can't go through that anymore. And nearly 3 decades later, I decided to see this movie again, saying that, oh, I was a teenager when I watched it first, so naturally I would have been affected differently. I'll handle it now. And I was amazed that the last scene had the same effect on me 30 years later when I saw the movie again. It's so powerful, it's so beautiful. It's it's something you know right from the beginning of the movie, that these two are not meant to be. They cannot be together. You know it right from the beginning. But when it actually happens, it tears you apart. It's a beautiful movie, The Way We Were. Do see it if you haven't. This is another huge favorite. Not a very commonly known movie. I think both Brief Encounter and Baby Were are much better known than this third movie, which is a movie called Once. And it's this lovely film about a busker in Dublin, on the streets of Dublin, and his encounter with this girl from the Czech Republic who sells paper flowers. And these two complete strangers bond with each other over their common love for music. And there's this music store in Dublin whose owner allows the girl to come during lunch hours and just play on the piano. And that's where this guy meets her, and they instantly connect. They connect with each other. And it's basically over this mutual love for music. And the film is tender. It is beautiful because there is hardly any overt expression of love between the two characters, but you can feel it. You can feel the connection between them. There's this wonderful scene. She's married, as he finds out that she's married and she has a husband in the Czech Republic who's sort of trying to come to the UK. And there's this beautiful scene where he asks her that, do you still love him? And she replies in Czech, something to the effect of, Miyeju te. It's a phrase in Czech that she utters. I don't know if I've got the pronunciation right or not. But she says, Miyeju te, and he asks her, what does that mean? And she refuses to translate. And I saw the movie exactly the same way, not knowing what she said, and and I saw the whole movie, and it ends on a beautiful, beautiful note. It ends on a wonderful note. And years later, I somehow came across this phrase, "Mir Yute" again, and I realized that it meant "I love you." And it took me back to this movie where the guy asked her that, do you still love your husband? And that's what she had replied. And it made me see the whole movie so differently. It's beautiful. It made me see the movie all over again, and I was just bowled over by its charm and its romance, really. And as I said, the ending of the movie is beautiful. To me, this is again a very personal thing, but how a love story ends is what either appeals to me or or I find it disappointing that, okay, no, this is just about okay, or this is brilliant. And once is brilliant, you know. So if you get a chance to see this movie, if you haven't seen, and it's got a fabulous soundtrack. It has some wonderful songs by Glenn Hansard and Marketa Iglova, who are the lead pair in this movie. It's got a fabulous soundtrack by them. So if you're a music fan, if you're a romantic at heart, see once and you won't be disappointed. The next movie is a directorial debut of the immensely talented Sofia Ford Coppola, and the movie is called Lost in Translation, as most of you would know. This was a debut movie. It stars Bill Murray and a wonderful, wonderful teenaged Scarlett Johansson. And it's again a story of human connection, which sort of borders on romance and love. It's about this fading, aging movie star portrayed by Bill Murray, who comes to Tokyo to shoot for a whiskey commercial. And there in the same hotel, he meets this beautiful young girl who's married recently to a photographer, who's a celebrity photographer, and he's in Tokyo for an assignment. And she's lonely, she's bored, she has no one to talk to in a foreign country where no one understands the language. So they meet at the bar of the hotel for the first time, and they start talking. And they develop a beautiful relationship between the two of them. There are a few ups and downs in their relationship when the character of Bill Murray, he calls another woman to his hotel room, and they spend the night together. So this girl is a little upset and annoyed with him for that. So they have their ups and downs. But the movie, once again, ends on a beautiful note where he's going back to America, Bill Murray, and while in the cab, he sees Scarlett Johansson on the streets of Tokyo, and he stops the cab. He gets off, and he goes in, gives her a hug, and whispers something into her ear. And in every viewing that I have had of Lost in Translation, I've wondered, what did he say to her? Are they going to meet again? Will they continue being in a relationship? What did he say to her? What was her response? Just makes me wonder all the time. Beautiful movie, Lost in Translation. The next movie actually is not one movie but two movies. It's part of a trilogy, the Before trilogy by Richard Linklater. And I'm talking about the first two, Before Sunrise and Before Sunset. Two of my favorite love stories of all time. The first one, Before Sunrise, is a 1995 movie about this young American guy, Jesse, played brilliantly by Ethan Hawke, who's traveling on a Eurorail train, and there he meets this beautiful French girl called Celine, portrayed by Julie Delpy, and they strike a conversation and they start talking, and it's from there that they realize that they're being drawn to each other, and impulsively they decide to get off at Vienna and spend the whole day together before moving on to their respective destinations. And Before Sunrise is about that entire day spent by two strangers drawn to each other in a romantic European city. I mean, how could they not fall in love? How could they not end up being together? That's what Before Sunrise is about. And the movie ends beautifully with the two of them parting at Vienna rail station with the promise that they'll meet there again, exactly same date, 1 year later. They don't exchange numbers, they don't exchange any other details about each other, just a promise that they'll meet after 1 year. Do they or do they not? That's where Before Sunrise ends. And Before Sunset happens 9 years later, when Jesse is in Paris, and he's there as an author who's written a book called This Time, which is basically a book about that one day he spent with Celine in Vienna. And the book is a bestseller, and he's there to sign his books in a small Parisian bookshop. And there he meets Celine after 9 years. She's in Paris, and she's come there to see him for the book signing, and they meet. And they spend the whole day together in Paris this time, just like they had 9 years ago in Vienna. Only this time the equation is slightly changed. Jesse is married. Celine has a boyfriend, and a steady boyfriend at that. They're both in, separate relationships. But they find that the chemistry between the two of them is still the same. And they discover reasons why they couldn't meet after 1 year as they had promised in Vienna. And the movie is absolutely fascinating. And the amazing thing about Before Sunset, just like Before Sunrise, personally I have a slight more preference towards Before Sunset than Before Sunrise, though they're both brilliant movies. But this amazing thing about Before Sunset is the whole movie is actually like overhearing an intimate conversation between two people on the streets of Paris. There is no real plot, or there's no action as such. It's just two people who are communicating, who are connecting with each other at a level which is so fascinating. And again, the movie ends on an absolutely, it's one of my favorite endings of any movie, where Celine is she's put on this Nina Simone CD, and she's singing and pouting like Nina Simone, and in that Nina Simone intonation, she tells Jesse that you're going to miss your flight, and he just smiles at her and says, "Yes, I know." Oh, it's such a beautiful ending. It's such a beautiful ending to a wonderful movie. Do see, this is a box set of the two movies, but there also was a third movie called Before Midnight, which according to me pales in comparison to these two beauties. These two are a must watch: Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, starring Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. Do watch them. The next movie is a really small and mostly unknown British movie called The Waiting Room. It was made in 2007, I think, and it's a beautiful little film. It's about human equations and feelings and the faith and belief of love. The two principal characters in this movie are not in love with each other. In fact, the girl Anne is she's in love. She's having an affair. She's a single mother, and she's having an affair with her best friend's husband. And the guy, he's happily engaged to someone whom he loves. But they have a chance meeting at the waiting room of a railway station, where there is this old man who's waiting for his wife to return. They know that she's never going to return. It's just the man is delusional, and the man is, he's living in his own dream world, in his own, fantasy. She's not going to return. But because of the kind of faith, the kind of belief he has in his love, it makes them wonder. And they are inexplicably drawn towards each other. They keep bumping into each other, all thanks to this man. And, what happens to the two of them is what this movie is about. And this movie also has a lot of magic about it, which only when you see the movie you will realize that at times, despite all its heartaches and its, negatives, love can also be magical. This movie proves that. Do watch it. The Waiting Room, not easily available, I think. I mean, I got this DVD from Amazon. I don't know if it's still available on Amazon or not, but do try and get this DVD from somewhere and watch the movie. You won't be disappointed. It's a beautiful little film, The Waiting Room. Another another lovely British movie. This was, I think, made in 2005, and it stars Ewan McGregor and Emily Blunt. It's called Salmon Fishing in the Yemen. Very honestly, I knew nothing about the movie, but the title intrigued me, and I wanted to find out what this movie was about. And true enough to its title, it's about salmon fishing in the Yemen. Ian McGregor plays a character called Fred, he's a fishing expert, and he's hired by an Arab sheikh to cultivate salmon fishing in Yemen. And he knows it's an impossible task. He said, it's just, the conditions are not right for salmon to be bred there. I just can't do it. But he's forced and coaxed by the British administration, the government, to go ahead with it because it gives them a big story. They need a positive story for British Middle East relationships, and there can be nothing more positive than this in their wisdom. And the person who keeps pushing him is Harriet, who works for the administration, and that's Emily Blunt. So these two people, they end up on opposite sides. He just doesn't want to do it, and she's forcing him to do it. This salmon farming in Yemen. And they end up being drawn to each other. They end up falling in love with each other. Of course, they have hurdles which they have to cross. Fred is married. Harriet is in a serious relationship, almost engaged to the man she loves. So whether they can overcome those hurdles and get together in the end is what this movie is about. It's, as I said, it's relatively a lesser known movie, but it's a very charming, very beautiful movie. Salmon Fishing in the Yemen. Do see it. This next movie is another indie gem. It's a beautiful, wonderful movie called Me and You and Everyone We Know. It's the directorial debut of Miranda July, who also plays the lead role in the movie, of Christine. And it's her story, it's her love story with this guy called Richard, who is a shoe shop salesman. He's divorced and lives with his two teenage sons. And the film is basically the love story of Christine and Richard. But what makes it really interesting is some absolutely amazing characters this movie has. Some of the characters are quite quirky, some are quite questionable, and but it's overall quite a unique film in the sense, the characters that surround the lead pair are quite amazing. The teenage sons of Richard, then he has two teenage girls who are his neighbors, and they're absolutely wacky and crazy. He has this friend of his who works with him in the shoe shop, and he shares a bizarre relationship with the teenage girls who are his neighbors. So it's all these characters and their little subplots and their little quirkiness and some absolutely outrageous moments, which make this movie very, very watchable and lovable. But end of the day, it's a love story between Christine and Richard, beautifully shot, beautifully told. Do watch it if you can. Me and You and Everyone We Know. The last movie is it's really not a love story, but as the title suggests, it's a story of breaking up. It's a 1997 movie starring Russell Crowe and Salma Hayek, who play Steve and Monica respectively. and it's about their breaking up and making up, constantly. It's an on off relationship. Just every fight, every disagreement tends to split them apart further, but somewhere down the line also enhance their love for each other. It's it's something, sometimes you can't explain love, you can't reason love, you can't rationalize or be objective about love. That's what the breaking up so beautifully shows. And this, they keep on having this on off relationship till the time when he eventually proposes to her and they get married. What happens after that? Can their marriage survive the tumultuous on and off equation? Is what breaking up is about. It's a beautiful movie about love, about breakups, about heartbreaks. It's beautiful to watch. Salma Hayek and Russell Crowe in Breaking Up. Do see it if you haven't. So this concludes this video of my top 10 romantic movies. There are actually a few more movies which I'd like to talk about, but I didn't want to make this video, way too long. Maybe I'll do a second part of my favorite romantic movies with you. But do see some of these movies if you haven't. I am sure all the romantics in you would love some of my choices. Look forward to the next time. Bye for now.